All right, good morning, everybody. This is demo number 3. We're coming along pretty well, I think. And last time you had demo number 2, which had to do with getting the clay and wedging the clay and getting ready to work with the clay. Now I'm going to talk to you this morning about ways that you can work with the clay, and specifically clay tools and your project drying. And so you have, this isn't going to be a super long one. We've got some stuff to look at, but not an awful lot of things. But let me start by just showing you what some of the tools are. And we can look at, we have wooden tools. A lot of these, they are kind of like putty sticks, I guess. Some of them even look a little bit like popsicle sticks. But we use these for, you can cut into the clay if you need to. You can, if you've got a big chunk of clay like this in front of you and you don't have a wire cutting tool, you can very easily just use something like this and cut your clay right down the middle. That'll do that. You can use it to, if you're going to do some kind of decorations or other, you can use these to make incisions into the clay. And especially when the clay is this plastic, if it's this soft, you can do all kinds of stuff with it. And so these are really handy. You can use them to smooth things out if you need to. You can do all sorts of stuff with these. They're really, really handy, and we've got a lot of different shapes and sizes, and they do different things depending on what you need them to be doing. So you've got those. We have plastic tools as well, and it's funny, you know, I'm going to show you some kitchen utensils in a minute, and this is one of them as well. This is just a simple spatula from the 99-cent store, and it's surprising how many things you can use around the house that work perfectly well with what you're doing in the studio as well. But we've got some that are a little more specialized. This is a lot like one of the wooden ones, and this one is as well. The plastic ones, they tend to last longer. The wooden ones, especially the ones with these smaller tips, they tend to break off pretty easily, and they're a little bit more fragile. They don't last quite as long. The plastic ones are also a lot easier to clean because they just wipe off rather than the wood ones, which tend to kind of soak up the clay and hang on to it. So that's those. And then we also have loop tools, and these are really, really handy. These come in a variety of different shapes and sizes. Most of them are two-ended like this, like these two. This is a really, really common shape that you'll find, and we use these for shaping the clay. We use these for hollowing out the clay. Sometimes if we need to scoop things out of the clay, if we need to make a, like maybe kind of a bowl shape or something like that. I picked this up real quick to just kind of show you. This was a marine project that one of the girls did last year that unfortunately she didn't get to pick up, and it never got finished. But she had put together this whole whale, and it was all one piece, and we were like, that's not really going to work because a piece that solid is going to take forever in the kiln. We're going to have to scoop some of that out. So we came up with the idea of actually making some kind of like a box out of it. So she went ahead and she got a piece like this or a tool like this, and she just literally scooped the clay out of here to create this opening inside there. And then we took the top off. Well, before that, we took the top off with a wire tool. So we had the top, she scooped the top open, she opened up the base, and then she's got a box. And so that worked out really well for her. But those tools can be very, very handy. You can do a lot of things with them, not just scooping things out. You can use them to shape things, you can trim things off of them. Once your clay gets leather hard, these are really good for shaping things and for trimming things. Once you get to the point where your clay isn't quite so mushy and plasticky, it holds its shape a lot better, and you can use these to get some real detail in there if you want to do something like maybe illustrations in there or anything like that that's going to be really detailed or very fine. So these are very helpful that way. A piece like this, a tool like this, is just really going to be good for cutting big chunks off of things or really scooping things out. We have some other tools that are called ribs, and these come in a variety of shapes and a variety of materials. Right now we really only have metal ribs, and the funny thing about ribs is these don't look so much like it, but they're called ribs because potters a long time ago actually used to use animals' ribs as the tools themselves. And what these are for is for shaping things. You can use them to cut, this will cut right through your clay like that. It's a little hard to get it off of there once you do, but they work well. Some of them have these serrated, I don't know if you can see this, these serrated edges, so it's very, very kind of spiky. You gotta be careful with them because they'll cut your fingers. You can use these to score your stuff when it comes to putting things together. If you're sticking one piece to another, you can score your clay like that and then apply your slip and then slap those two pieces together. It'll hold up real well. These are very handy for this. When your clay is very wet, or if you're rolling it out on the slab table, it tends to leave kind of a texture on your clay. You can use these to smooth out those rough edges. Doesn't take long, and everything's all back to normal again. So these are very handy for that. They're also handy for things like if you are working with something like this and you want to get it smoothed out inside, you can take the smooth edged rib and just get in there, and as long as the clay is soft, you can smooth it out in there as well. So these are very handy for that sort of thing. We have carving tools then as well. And these are generally for very small details. This is when you're trying to maybe, sometimes you want to put your name in something. I'm looking over here to see if there's anything that has, well, here we go. This is a box that one of the students in, I think no, this is one of my students. In fact, I think this might be Bailey's. Well, anyway, on this piece, she had this put together and it was leather hard, and she created these details in these pieces. This was a box that was based on The Great Gatsby, the book from, what is it, 10th grade, I think, 11th grade, I'm not sure. But she created these little indentations and incisions in here and these patterns and details using something like this piece right here. It's got a very, very small, fine tip point, and she could get in there and just do the carving that she wanted to do. And these are great for that. Same thing with these. You can use something like this for a little bit bigger pieces, a little bit more involved, if that's what you're looking for. So you've got that. Other pieces we've got, and again, like I said, you'd be surprised some of the stuff that you use around the house that you could use for your clay. Cookie cutters for Halloween coming up. If we ever get back, we can use stuff like that. Really simple things like an old toothbrush is great for getting a texture on something. If you want to make it look like it's kind of feathered or rough, or maybe just a little bit worn or beat up, you can do that. Forks and spoons work a lot like some of the other tools. Forks you could obviously use to do some scoring on your clay like that. Spoons you can use like the ribs to smooth things out, or again, like with this piece, you can scoop things out. Same sort of deal. You've got things, we have a big bag of straws because sometimes you need to make a hole in your clay, and if you have a straw, you now have a hole in your clay. And they're very helpful, and they're very handy, and they're cheap. We also use a lot of kind of surprisingly dumb stuff like paper clips and toothpicks. Anything you can find will work, and anything that works is fine for you to use. So you've got all of those things at your disposal, and as you saw the other day in the tour of the studio, we've got loads and loads of tools over there, lots of things for you to use, and lots of ways for you to use them. Let's see, the other thing I wanted to talk to you about is shrinking your clay. It does shrink. All of these pieces and everything else that you see in here is shrunken down from its original size. This piece of clay may be, oh, I don't know, I'm gonna say maybe it's about a £1/4 pound right now. When it's dried out, it's gonna be a lot less than that, right? It could be down to, it won't go quite to 1/8, but it'll shrink quite a bit. So one thing you have to keep in mind whenever you're making something is that some things are gonna get smaller. The first time you fire it, it's gonna lose a lot of moisture. And the second time you fire, it's going to lose all of its moisture altogether. But before they even go in for the first firing, you want to dry your clay to some extent, but you need to dry it slowly. If you dry it too quickly, it'll just fall apart, it'll crack, it'll break on its own. If you don't dry it evenly, it won't fire evenly, and it will have, it'll become misshapen. It won't work out the way that you wanted it to. And you've already put so much work into these things. You really don't want to have something like, something you've been working on for a long time. You don't want it falling apart because you dried it too quickly, which is the importance of what you saw in the last demo when Ms. Singleton was saying about putting your stuff in plastic bags while you're working on it. And even after you're done working on it, you want to keep it in the plastic bag because it's still going to dry in that bag. You just don't want it drying too quickly. If it dries too quickly, it breaks, it falls apart. And even if it doesn't fall apart before it goes into the kiln, it'll still fall apart while it's in the kiln. So you have to be very careful with that. Let's see. Okay, as I was saying, if it's not controlled drying, if it happens too quickly, it will crack. If it dries unevenly, it'll cause cracks. If it dries, excuse me, too unevenly, it won't fire in the kiln very well. And I think that's about it. I was just going to show you a couple other things that I pulled out really quickly. When you're doing pieces and you want to add additions to them, we have things like molds where you can take a piece of clay and lay it into a mold, and you'll get a shape on it. In this case, it's kind of like a leaf, and you can then cut that out and you can add that. That's kind of similar to what she did with this box here when she cut these pieces out, although I don't think she used molds for these, she just hand did these. But you can use things like that. You can make flowers and leaves and things like that. We have other elements that you can use. And then we also have these texture mats. This one happens to be kind of a wood grain texture, and what you would do with this is lay this down, lay your clay down on top of it, and then roll it out. And when it comes out, I'm just doing this by hand real quick so you can get kind of an idea what it looks like. You'll have a texture kind of like a wood texture, or a wood piece, or a board. I guess that's what we call those. And I think that's that. I talked before about drying clay out and the way that it changes color. It will go from, this is your initial plastic stage where it's still really soft and it's still really wet. It's still got a lot of moisture to it. And then you'll go to your bone dry stage here just before you're going to put it in the kiln the first time. And then the second time, after it comes out of the kiln the first time, you've got your bisque ware, and this is the white clay that this turns into once it's been fired twice. So, or once. First firing, it'll turn like this. Second firing, you're going to glaze it, and it'll come out colored. So that's that for today. That is section 3, and those are your notes for section 3. And after today, that is the first section of notes that you're going to be turning in. So make sure that you get all 3 sets of your notes. The first one, and then we had the second one, which was Ms. Singleton retrieving clay and kneading and wedging the clay. And then today you've got the introduction to clay tools and project drawing. And that's that for today. So thanks everybody, and I'll see you in a bit.